Dre all day.
Let's get to it. You are now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves me, you, and everybody else out there to go make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together into one bundle, one message, one philosophy, one book, one show, and we call it Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is how to move on in life. Quote, move on, close quote. Everyone heard that phrase before, right? I have moved on. It's time for us to move on. These people over here need to move on and stop clinging to the past. Stop talking about the past. Stop harping on something that has already happened, that's already over, or something that maybe you hope will be over because you and everybody else or whomever else is involved would just move on. I wish this person would just move on from this thing and stop holding on to it. Stop talking about it. Stop coming back to it. How can you do this though? There's a technique to moving on in life. Now, I talked in episode number 1300 about keeping your past in the past. And the thing is about your past and about moving on in life, if you do not develop this skill of moving on, and yes, it is a skill, because if you think about it, you know any people who need to move on from something in their history that for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get past it. They can't seem to let it go. They can't seem to let that past thing be a past thing, and they're still holding on to it as if it's the present when everyone except them can see that it's not. You do know some people who fit that description, right? So that means that it's a skill. Moving on is an ability that some people have and not everybody has, and not all of us have it all the time. Also, if you don't learn this skill moving on, and it is a skill as I just explained, then your past, understand both the stuff that you really want to be in your past and you want everyone to forget about, and the stuff that even went your way. See, the stuff that worked in your favor, the stuff that were your accomplishments, your successes, the achievements that you're proud of, the things that you like when people remember you for those things can hold you hostage just as much as the bad stuff can hold you hostage. Today, what we're going to do is some preventative work to head that problem off before it even becomes one in your life. That could be, again, the good of your past or the not so good of your past holding you back. How do you actually move on in life? I'm going to give you the skills necessary. Point number one, topic again is how to move on in life. Accept that things come to an end, both good things and the bad things. If you're going through something right now that you really wish never happened, something that you really want to be over, something that you hope lasts only as long as it needs to so you can get on to the next thing, the good news is it will eventually end. Nothing lasts forever. So whatever you're going through right now that's kind of shitty, you're not really feeling this, it will end at some point. But right now, on the other hand, maybe you're riding a wave of good luck. Maybe you're riding a wave of things breaking in your favor. Maybe everything is working the way that you want it to work right now. Everything's just going really smoothly right now, and you wish things would just stay this way. You wish that things would you wish you had just have this energy all the time, everywhere you go and everything you do, and it would never come to a close. I got some bad news for you. It will eventually end. So the first skill that you must develop, or the skill that you must re-engage with, because I think this is something that you know on some level, maybe you don't think about it too often, maybe you don't apply it at all, but you know it on some level, just accepting the fact that everything comes to a close. This acceptance will make it easier for you to move on. First of all, to move on from a good thing, even something that you want to happen. It'll make it easier for you to move on from it because you'll understand that even good things eventually run their course and it's time for some other thing to replace it. Many people get stuck in the past in life because they never learn to let something that's over come to a close. And this can be, again, there are some of us who have the challenge mentally of holding on to things that we didn't want. You went through some traumatic experience in your past. You've been around some people who've done you wrong. You thought everything was breaking perfectly for you in a certain situation, and then it went left when you thought everything was going to go right, and you haven't quite mentally recovered from that. that setback. There are some people who have that challenge, but a lot of people, those of you who are the goal setting, ambitious, forward thinking, progressive individuals, you could have the opposite problem. It's still a problem, it's just on the opposite end of the scale. This is when things have worked out for you. You have achieved things. You do have a track record of success. Things have gone the way that you wanted them to go. People do know you for your achievements, at least in some pockets of the world, in some industries, wherever you're at, in a small way or a big way. Those things can hold people back just as easily as the negative things hold people back, because you're still trying to recreate that magic from something that you did in the past, and understand that timing, that situation, those exact circumstances are never going to present themselves the exact same way ever again in your life. But if you keep trying to recreate that same thing from the past, then you're going to have a problem, because it's never going to happen. But you're going to keep trying, and then eventually you're going to look to the outside observer. You're going to look like a museum piece trying to recreate something that happened a year ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You can't do it. You're not succeeding at doing it. And you're the only one who doesn't notice that you're still living in 5 years ago. I heard the rapper 50 Cent was talking about this, how people asking about his first album, which was called Get Rich or Die Trying. He came out of the gate. This was his debut album, and he sold over 10 million copies. And people ask him, when it comes to your album, being that you're this guy who's always doing new things, you're always trying to advance and get better, do you think you could ever recreate or do better than what you did on your first album? And his second album sold 10 million copies as well. Do you think you could do that again, 50? People have asked him. I've heard people ask him this question for the last 5 or so years. And 50 says, listen, I understand that there will never be an environment in which everything is going to be set up. The stars will never align in such a way for me to put out music the way that things aligned for me when I put out my first album. It will never be like that ever again, because I was a debut artist. I was coming off everybody knowing that I had gotten shot. It was a time when people were still buying music, when you had to actually go to the store and purchase a CD if you wanted music. Some of you might not even remember that time in life. And there was just the timing. It was Eminem being as popular as he was, Dr. Dre producing my album. It'll never be like that ever again. And I remember hearing 50 saying, or someone tell the story of 50, when his first album had come out, and of course when musicians put music out and they're popular, they go on tour. So 50's on tour, and there was one time he was backstage after a show, and he was saying to his crew members, people who were with him, he was like, man, we need to just sit here and just soak in this energy that we're in right now, because y'all need to understand. And 50 was saying he understood that this will never, ever happen again. This is while he was at the height of his fame, the height of his popularity. Everything was 50 Cent. Everybody knew who 50 Cent was. Even if you didn't listen to rap music, you knew who this guy was. That's how popular he was at that time. And he said, I know this is never going to happen again. Even while it was going on, he said that. A lot of people don't have that skill. This is a skill of moving on. And this is something that 50 and Robert Greene talked about in their joint book called The 50th Law. And the book is about fear. And one of the fears that a lot of people have, and Robert Greene articulated this really well in the book, is that people have a fear of leaving behind something that's already happened. And again, the reason I'm emphasizing somebody like 50 Cent is because a lot of you, when you hear this topic of how to move on in life, you may automatically default to thinking, I'm talking about moving on from something that you didn't want, and you just want to erase that out of your mind. It's one of those bad movies you want to delete, send it back to Netflix, send it back to Blockbuster Video, and never have to watch that movie again. Yes, that is one way of moving on, but the other way of moving on that successful people don't seem to grasp, it never even occurs to them, is you got to move on from your successes. Every success, no success actually, is going to last forever. If you're an athlete, eventually your career as an athlete is going to be over, and you still got another 50% of your life that you have to live. And if you're still living your athletic career, but you've been retired for 10 years, eventually people are not going to be paying you any mind, because you're still living back then and you don't do that thing anymore. What are you doing now? If you're a musician who came out and sold 10 million records like 50 Cent did 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, you're not doing that thing anymore. Are you still walking around hoping that people are going to treat you as someone who matters based on what you did back then? Or are you doing something now to make yourself relevant, as the word people like to use these days? What are you doing now that makes you useful to an audience of people? I understand you did something back then, but what are you doing now? A lot of people have that fear of accepting that this good thing is over, and now I got to do something else. Now I got to recreate myself. Now I have to reestablish myself. Now I might be moving into a completely different space where nobody knows me, where I don't have a track record, but I got to establish myself here because that old thing's over. This is something that happens especially with people who are forced kind of to change industries, such as an athlete. Maybe not all the time, but let's say an athlete, you get out of playing football or basketball or baseball or I don't know, gymnastics, swimming, all of these sports, you're pretty much done by the age of 30, 40. A lot of people done by 30. The lucky ones are done by the age 40. If you live till 80, you're an athlete, so you're probably in good shape. You still got another 40 years to live, 50 years to live. What are you going to do? If you're not going to become a coach or a trainer in your sport, which could allow you to kind of stay very close to what you were already doing in some ways, but let's say you want to start a business, let's say you want to write books, let's say you want to become a professional speaker, you want to become I don't know, anything. You could be anything that you want to be. I mean, if you got a college degree, maybe you want to go back to school, whatever you want to do, you may be stepping into a completely new industry where nobody in that industry gives a damn that you were the best running back in the NFL 7 years ago. Nobody cares that you averaged 20 points a game playing in Greece 3 years ago. Nobody cares that you almost won a gold medal in the Olympics at 2 Olympics ago. You came away with the silver and you went on the tour, your whole town, and they named a street after you. All of that actually happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but who cares now that you've moved on? Or have you moved on? One thing I guarantee you, everybody else has moved on. You don't want to be the museum piece who's still living back then, back there at that thing that already took place. Accepting that things come to an end, the bad things, of course, but also the good things, makes it easier for you to move on from that good thing, is run its course. A lot of people get stuck in the past because they never just learn to accept, that, yes, this is great right now, but it's not going to last forever. Let's move on. This is the man who's, I don't know, any of you go to nightclubs, you see a guy who may be a little bit too old to be in the club, and you're looking at him like, all right, this guy should know. Everybody else seems to notice, but he maybe doesn't notice, or maybe he doesn't care. You don't want to be that person. Like, if any of you ever been to a nightclub or a bar and you saw somebody who was looked a little bit too old for the clientele that they were surrounded by, understand that that's the same way that other people, same way you're looking at that person, that's the way people are looking at you when you're still living in your past successes and you haven't moved on to anything new. So as silly as that person looks, just make sure you don't become that person in what you're doing. So this is why you got to constantly check yourself. All right, has this thing come to a close? And is it time for me to do something new? Point number 2. Today's topic is how to move on in life. While you are in the midst of the current thing, whatever that current thing is, especially if you're doing something that's working for you and everything's popping off for you right now, you're doing great. All right, excellent. All right, pat yourself on the back, but don't get too comfortable. While things are working out in your favor, those of you who fit this description, start setting up the next thing before you are done with the current thing. It's hard to move on in life if you don't have anything to move on to. See, the athlete who retires and they wake up the day after their retirement and then they realize, oh shit, I never thought about what I was going to do after my career was over. Now they don't have anywhere to go. They don't have anything to move on to. So it's hard for them to move on because they don't have a place to be. All right, it's hard to move. Any of you ever moved from one living space to another living space? You moved out of this apartment, moved into a house, you moved out of this condo, moved to a different one, moved out of your parents' house, moved into your own spot. If you don't have a place, if you have a move out date that you got to get out of one place, but you don't have a move in date to where you're going to move to, then it's pretty hard to move, right? I mean, all your stuff you got to take all your stuff out of the place that you're in now, but you don't have a place to take it to. That's a problem. All right? That's a dilemma. That's a quagmire. You don't want to be in that space. You need something to move on to. So what's the next thing for you? Using the example of somebody like 50 Cent. I remember I heard this guy named Julian Alexander, who is a photographer. He did a lot of photo shoots for the albums for a lot of artists back in the late 90s and early 2000s. He's the one who actually did the photo shoot for 50 Cent's album cover for Get Rich or Die Trying. And he said when he did the photo shoot for 50, he was just talking to 50 idly, and 50 was saying things like, man, I'm going to make movies, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to have a clothing line, I'm going to do all these things that 50 was talking about doing. This is before his album even came out. And the photographer, Julian Alexander, was telling the story. He said, I was looking at 50 like, yo, you haven't even put your album out yet. You're talking about doing all these other things. But over the years, we all have come to learn that everything that 50 was talking about doing, they all came to fruition. This guy, he's written books. He put a whole bunch of other artists into the game and let them make money and build their own brands. He's made a whole bunch of movies. He's doing TV shows now. All the things that he was talking about doing, he's actually done. And what the photographer said was this guy saw it. He was already setting up the next move while he was doing the current move. The first thing that I remember reading about 50. I did a virtual mentors episode on 50, so I know a good amount of things that went on in his history, is why I'm using him as an example here. But he's a guy who has mastered the skill of moving on. I mean, he moved on from getting shot, was a near-death experience, as close to near-death as you can come. Moved on from that to putting his album out. Moved on from that to, all right, let me do movies and TV and all the other things that he did. But when he first signed his contract with Eminem and Dr. Dre back in 2000, and this is around the summer of 2002, I remember, the first thing that he did was he went and registered the trademark for G-Unit clothing, because he knew he was going to start a clothing line. And this is as soon as he signed the contract. As soon as he signed the contract and he got some money for signing the deal, he used that money to register the trademark, because he knew that once he became more popular, he wanted to brand his company, which was called G-Unit, and then he could start a clothing line. And this was a way that he can make money, and it's also a way he could build his fan bases. When people are fervent fans of whatever kind of movement you have, especially in music, people want to buy the merchandise, right? And it was a way that he could have all the artists that he was going to sign to his G-Unit label, have them wear G-Unit clothing, and they could get a check. This is a way that they could eat. He was setting everybody else up to eat and setting himself up for long-term success before he had even done anything that was even going to make him the money yet. He was already setting this up. This is the point number 2 that I'm making here. Setting up the next thing before you were even done with the current thing. 50 was barely beginning the current thing. He was already setting up the next thing in his mind. This is strategic thinking. This is all about having progressive goals in life for everyone. Pursuit and realization of one goal should build on whatever the next goal is. So you right now, maybe you're thinking, well, I don't even know what my next goal is. Well, what better time than the present to start thinking about it? What's the ultimate outcomes that you wish to achieve in life? And then you just work backwards from each one of them. If you have more than one, what needs to be in place for that to happen? And what needs to be in place for that? And keep working backwards until you have strategized out exactly what you're going to do in your life, what you need to do for your business, what you need to do with and for the people who are around you. As long as you are alive, ladies and gentlemen, you need to have somewhere to go. You need to have something to do. You need to have something that you are in pursuit of, because this is what gives us life. Having a purpose is what gives us life. Person who has no purpose has no life. Person who has nowhere to go has no life. Person who has nowhere to be has no life. And since nothing lasts forever, understand that your purpose will probably change over time. Your long-term purpose may stay pretty much the same, depending on what your goals and aims are, but your short-term purposes will change. There was a time, again, we'll use 50 as an example here today. His purpose at one point was, let me get back healthy from these bullet wounds. Then it was, let me put some more music out in the street, see if I can get popular again. Then it was, let me get a record deal. Then it was, let me get my album ready, so this album will be great and it'll launch my career and help me launch a whole bunch of other people. Then it was, let me help these guys get on. Then let me write a book. Then let me make a movie. Then let me make a TV show. So his short-term purposes were changing, but his long-term purpose, whatever it was, I'm sure he knew what it was. I'm sure he knows what it is. I think he's still alive as of this recording. He was setting everything up to lead him towards the next thing is for the next thing. And this is a good thing that your purpose is changing over time. Even a person who starts a company, let's say, that lasts for centuries, at some point the founder of that company is going to step down and let somebody else run the company, right? That happens for everybody because nobody lives forever. Therefore, everything ain't going to last forever, at least not in the same forms. So always be thinking of, no matter what you're doing right now, even if it's going well, especially if it's going well, leverage the fact that things are working in your favor to start setting up whatever your next thing is going to be. Because when things are working in your favor, you have a run of momentum that you can leverage into whatever the next thing is going to be. When things are going in your favor, there are people who will pay attention to you who won't pay attention to you when things are not working. There's a small percentage of people who will treat you the same way no matter whether you're winning or losing. Most people are going to treat you differently if they think you're winning than if they think you're losing, or if they know who you are or if they don't know who you are. So while things are working and you're popular and you're hot and everything's popping, that's when you really need to be vigilant about setting up the next thing, because you have a whole lot of opportunity on your hands to do so. Point number 3. Today's topic is how to move on in life. At the current situation that you're in, do your best at what you're doing, so that when it is time for you to move on, you can do so happily and with no regrets. See, the thing that you're doing right now, like we talked about a couple days ago, the topic was your current opportunity is your best opportunity. So you see how all of these points, all of these topics, they all are interconnected. And I'm just connecting 2 topics. We're talking over 1,000 of these that we've done here on Work on Your Game. I'm just connecting 2 of them, but they all connect to each other. On this point, to this point, topic was doing the best at what you're doing. So when it's time to move on, you could do so happily with no regrets. You're not looking back at that past thing like, damn, there's some things that I didn't do there. There's some opportunity that I did not squeeze out of that situation. There's some things that I could have said that I never said. There is some money that I left on the table. You don't want to be looking back at the old things in that way, because it'll be really hard for you to move on knowing that you didn't do everything you needed to do in the old opportunity. Now you're on a new opportunity, and now you got this half dug well like we talked about a couple days ago. The regrets that most pull at our souls are the regrets from which we feel we left work undone, words unsaid, energy unused, opportunity unseized. Don't let that be you in any situation you've been in. The better you do while you're in a situation, the easier it will be for you to walk away from a situation, because you'll know that you've maximized the opportunity. You've taken everything you could out of that opportunity. There is no reason for you to need to stick around and just be there, because look, you've done everything you needed to do in that space. I did everything I could. I checked off every box. Even if it doesn't work out the way that you want, if you know you did everything you needed to do in that space, everything you could have done in that space, then you won't have a problem moving on. It's really hard to move on from something when you know you have not done that, when you know you haven't given your best effort, when you know you haven't put the best work in, when you know you've left opportunity on the table. As John Wooden, legendary UCLA basketball coach, said, at the end of the game, he would say this to his players every game, at the end of the game, the only way you'll know if you're a winner is not by the numbers on the scoreboard. You'll only know if you're a winner if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I gave my best effort with whatever opportunity I had in this game today. So even if we win by 50, if you didn't give your best effort, you're not a winner. And even if we lose by 50, if you gave your best effort, then you can call yourself a winner. It's the same thing with the opportunities you're going to have in life. Michael Jordan, when he retired from basketball the first time in 1993, the thing that he said at that press conference was, look, well, at that time, for those who don't know, he had won 3 straight NBA championships. He won the scoring title, I think 4 or 5 times in a row. He had won the MVP multiple times. He was clearly above and beyond every other player in the world. He was recognized as the best player, probably the best athlete in the world at that time, 1993. And he said, the reason why I'm walking away from basketball is because I don't see any other challenges here. I've done everything that I wanted to do. I wanted to win a championship. I wanted to win multiple championships. I wanted to win 3 in a row, which Magic Johnson and Larry Bird never did. Those are 2 of his contemporaries, a little bit older than him, but they hadn't done it. So I did that. I led the league in scoring. I won the title 3 years in a row. I'm the best player. Everybody recognizes that. What else do I have to prove here? And that's why he walked away. He was okay with walking away. And Michael Jordan was only 30 years old when he walked away from basketball. If you could even imagine that, just by comparison. James Harden is 30 years old right now. Stephen Curry is, I believe, 31 years old. LeBron James is 35. Jordan walked away when he was 30 because he felt he had squeezed all the juice out of that orange of basketball. No pun intended. Basketball is orange, in case you didn't know. He came back a year and a half later, lost, and then he found himself some new motivation. All right, people think I'm done. People think the game has passed me by. That was his new challenge. That was his new motivation. That was the next thing for him. But he went and played baseball in between. We ain't going to talk about that. He came back to basketball. There was a new challenge. People said, oh, Jordan's done. Other players are better than him. That was his new motivation. That was his new purpose, was to prove that he's not done. And he did that again, won 3 more championships, then he retired again. Then he came back again. He was changing his purpose over time because he was evolving as a person over time. It's the same thing that you're going to be doing. Let's recap today's topic, which is how to move on in life. We know about keeping your past in the past. That's episode 1300 if you didn't hear it. This is the skill of moving on we're talking about here today. That your past, both your good and your bad, can hold you hostage if you do not learn to move on. A lot of people know about moving on from the bad stuff, but you also got to be able to move on from the good stuff. And that's mainly what I'm thinking about when I came up with this topic here today. Number 1, accept that everything comes to an end. This will make it easier for you to move on from a good thing that has run its course in addition to the stuff that you didn't want. Many people get stuck in their past because they never learn to let something go because it's come to a close. All right, don't become the museum piece still holding on to 2 years ago or 20 years ago. Number 2, start setting up the next thing before you're done with the current thing. It's hard to move on in life if you don't have anywhere to move to. All right, it's hard to move out of your current apartment if you don't have a new apartment to move anything to. The movers are asking you, all right, where are we taking this stuff? And you don't know. All right, this is about having progressive goals in life. Pursuit and realization of one goal builds on the next goal. This is about strategizing. So work backwards from where you want to be to where you are right now, so you know what your next steps are going to be in life. And since nothing lasts forever, understand that your purpose will change over time. This is a good thing. Your short-term purposes will change. Even a person who starts a company that lasts for hundreds of years, you don't live hundreds of years. So at some point you got to move on and let somebody else run things. Point number 3. Do your best at what you are doing now, so when it is time to move on, you can do so happily and with no regrets. The regrets that gnaw at our souls in life are those from which we left work undone, words unsaid, energy unused, opportunity unseized. The better you do while you're in the thing, the easier it'll be the way for you to walk away from the thing, knowing that you maximize every ounce of that opportunity. Work on your game. Dre all day.